back with your next class. In today's class, we are going to discuss Gymnosperms, the first spermatophytes or seed plants. Okay. The term Gymnosperm itself means seed. Gymno means naked and sperma means seed. So the name itself suggests that the plants are going to bear seeds, but the seeds would not remain inside a fruit. So that's why these are the plants which will bear naked seeds. Okay. Now see, in the late Paleozoic era, it was seen that gymnosperms used to predominate Earth. Okay, so that means just like all around you, if you see today, you would mostly see angiosperms. There was an era when all around Earth there were mainly gymnosperms found. Okay, but later on, as the environment kept on changing, they were then replaced by the predominant species of plants on Earth today, that is angiosperms. Okay. So even after the gymnosperms have been, outnumbered by the angiosperms, still around 900 species of gymnosperms remain. Okay. And out of that, most of the gymnosperms remain in higher altitude in colder climatic areas, and they are mainly the conifers. Okay, gymnosperms mainly are of 4 types that exist today, and the most predominant species among gymnosperms that exist today are the conifers. Okay, these are cone-bearing plants, hence the name conifers, and they also have excurrent habit, means they are going to have a Christmas tree-like appearance, means the lowermost branches will be longer and uppermost branches will be shorter, hence giving rise to a cone-shaped appearance. Okay. Though these conifers, they would be found in very higher altitude or cold climatic area. So that's why even they will have to face water deficiency, because water in those higher altitudes would be present in the form of ice rather than in the liquid form. That's why these plants will also show certain xerophytic adaptations, means adaptations to bear water shortage. Okay, so they would have certain kind of adaptations like needle-like leaves, so that lamina won't be profound, and if lamina is not profound, stomata would not be present, and less of stomata means less of transpiration, isn't it? So they will have needle-like leaves. They would the leaves will be able to withstand high you can say humidity, or you can say extreme conditions. Also they will have thick cuticle and sunken stomata, very important, thick cuticle, sunken stomata, etc. that will allow them to reduce the water loss from their body. So that being said about the most predominant species of gymnosperms, that is the conifers, next category of gymnosperms which are found in the plains or warmer climatic areas are the cycads. Okay. The cycads are those gymnosperms which have a palm tree-like appearance and foliage like the pteridophytes. Okay, leaves like a pteridophyte and the body like a palm tree. Okay, so they will have unbranched columnar trunk and with persistent leaf bases, and they will also bear cone-shaped or you can say appearances or cone-shaped structures in their leaf tips. Alright, so this being said about the cycads, they are the only gymnosperms which are now found in warmer climatic areas or in the plains. Fine. Now moving on to the third category of gymnosperms. The third category of gymnosperms is called These are certain kind of gymnosperms which are wooden climbers. Okay, and only 3 members exist in this category. Rest all of them are extinct, and these wooden climbers are ephedra, netum and Wilwichia. Okay, out of that, ephedra has huge medicinal benefits. And the last category is of gingoals. Okay, this particular category of gymnosperm is very interesting because in this category only 1 member exists. Rest all of the members have become extinct. So this member that exists is called Jingo Biloba. The name of the tree or the name of the plant is Jingo Biloba. This particular tree is a very tall tree with fan shaped. Okay, the leaves are very beautiful. They are very beautifully arranged and they are fan shaped. Hence, because of their beautifully arranged leaves, they would have, or they are commonly, or it is commonly known as the maidenhair tree. Okay, like in pteridophytes you know about maidenhair fern, that's adiantum, isn't it? Likewise, it is maidenhair tree. Alright, and because Jingo biloba is the only member that exists in its category, rest all of the members have become extinct, we also call this tree to be the living fossil. Alright, what do we call it? Living fossil. Alright, so do remember this important information regarding the gymnosperms. So mainly gymnosperms, they used to predominate earth in a particular era, but then due to change in the environment, now they have been outcompeted by the angiosperms, and angiosperms have become the predominant species of plants or the most advanced species of plant on earth today, and hence only a few members of gymnosperms remain, and they are mainly conifers, the most predominant, which are found in the colder climatic areas. Then comes cycads with the palm tree like appearance, which are found in plains or warm climatic areas. Then comes the netums, which are the wooden climbers. There the three members exist, that is ephedra, wilwichia, netum, and the last one is jingoals, where the only member that exists is Jingo biloba. It's a tall tree, and being the only member existing in its group, we call it the living fossil as well. So this being said regarding the gymnosperms, now let us move into details about the gymnosperms and learn regarding their general characteristics. Alright. So see here. Gymnosperms bear naked seeds and the first spermatophytes. That's very obvious by now, all of you. They bear medium-sized trees or tall trees or shrubs. Okay, do remember, among the gymnosperms, annuals and herbs, that is very small-sized trees, or sorry, very small-sized plants would be completely absent. Herbs are completely absent. Annuals are completely absent. Means plants which have a life cycle of 1 year. That kind of a plant does not exist among the gymnosperms. Sequa or giant redwood, okay, commonly known as giant redwood, is one of the tallest trees, okay, which is one of the tallest trees that is found in the Redwood Park in California. Male and female gametophyte do not have free living existence. That's very important. You know about bryophytes and pteridophytes now. That bryophytes and pteridophytes, they have a gametophytic generation and sporophytic generation. Both have their own existence, isn't it? But in that case, here in gymnosperms, the gametophyte do not have any free living or independent existence. It remains within the main plant body, that is the sporophyte. Alright. Now, main plant body is sporophytic or diploid and has true roots, true stem and true leaves. Alright. Now let us see what are the type of stem, root or leaf found in the gymnosperms. See, roots are generally taproot. Roots in Pinus have fungal associations in the form of mycorrhiza. Now mycorrhiza is a symbiotic association between roots of higher plant and fungi. So Pinus, okay, it's under the conifers. Alright. So Pinus is a very common, very predominate a member of conifers. So Pinus possesses mycorrhizal roots, means in its roots it has fungal associations, which is a symbiotic association where both the plant and the fungi will be mutually benefited by each other, while the Cycas is under Cycads. Okay, so Cycas, there will be found coralloid roots in association with algae or blue-green algae, that is cyanobacteria. To remember, that means roots of Pinus have mycorrhizal associations, that's with the fungi, and Cycas roots have association with algae or cyanobacteria, we call it coralloid roots. Alright. Now, stems are unbranched in Cycas and branched in Pinus or Cedrus. Alright. Leaves may be simple or compound. They are well adapted to withstand extreme temperature, humidity and wind, which I have told you, conifers being found in very higher altitude or in very colder climatic areas. So they are going to be formed in a manner so that they can withstand all these extreme conditions. In conifers, needle-like leaves reduces the surface area. Their thick cuticle and sunken stomata reduces water loss. Alright. Now, vascular tissues are well developed. Xylem and phloem are very well developed. Of course, these gymnosperms are mostly known for their tall trees, okay? And being tall, of course, the water and minerals will have to transport sometimes up to 100 of meters. If the tree itself is 100 meter, right? So in that case, the water and minerals have to be conducted from the root to the leaf, and where it has to be transported for hundreds of meters. So in that case, of course, they will have to have well-developed xylem and phloem. They are heterosporous. Now, finally, we are entering a very important section of our discussion, where we are going to discuss the reproduction or life cycle of the gymnosperms. So this part is very, very, very important. All of you listen very carefully. All right. So see here, the gymnosperms are heterosporous. So none of the members here are homosporous anymore. All the members are heterosporous, and you know very well what is heterospory, isn't it? Where separate microspore or male and megaspore female would be formed separately. Okay, there is not one type of spore, rather two distinct type of male and female spores will be formed, right? So they are heterosporous and produces smaller microspores and larger megaspores. All right. Now what will happen, you see here, try to understand this. Here, I'm separately discussing it here. See, in gymnosperms, just like I told you now about pteridophytes. In pteridophytes, as soon as they enter the reproductive phase, in pteridophytes, certain fertile leaves called sporophylls are born, isn't it? And those sporophylls will eventually bear the sporangia, inside which the spores will be generated, isn't it? Right? By meiosis, in the spore mother cell, spores will be generated, right? So also you know that sometimes the sporophylls may be found singly, okay, as a single leaf, or it might be found in cluster in the form of a cone-like structure called strobilus, isn't it? So now what will happen in gymnosperms, you see, in gymnosperms all the members are heterosporous, and during reproductive phase even the gymnosperms will bear fertile leaves called sporophyll. Alright. Now, being heterosporous, suppose in the gymnosperms, all these sporophylls will always be born in cluster. So they will always be aggregated together in a structure, cone-like structure or strobilus. Okay. So suppose this is a cone-shaped appearance. Suppose this is a cone-like appearance, and in this cone-like structure, okay, this is a cone-like structure, and in this cone-like structure there are various sporophyll present. Okay, now the sporophyll that is associated with microspore formation, we call those sporophyll to be microsporophyll. Try to understand this very carefully. It's related to the pteridophytes. Just like in pteridophytes, in gymnosperms also, during reproductive phase, fertile leaves called sporophylls are born. And they are always born in cluster in a cone-shaped structure. Okay. Now, those sporophylls which will be associated with the microspore, we call them to be microsporophyll. Alright. Commonly we call it stamen. Right? Now, microsporophyll will bear a sporangia and we will call it microsporangia, which is commonly called the pollen sac. Alright? And finally, the microsporangia inside will bear spores and we will call them microspores, or commonly the pollen grains. Is that clear? So a cone bearing microspore is called pollen cone. Is that clear? Now, similarly, in case of the cone associated with megaspore, what will happen? Suppose this is another cone which has many sporophyll and this is associated with megaspore. So what we will call those sporophyll to be? Megasporophyll. And megasporophyll is commonly known as carpel. Okay. Now, megasporophyll on its surface will bear sporangia. We will call it megasporangia, or commonly known as ovule. Okay. And finally, the ovule inside will bear the megaspore. Okay. Megaspore, which will be the female gametophyte, which will give rise to the female gametophyte. Alright. Fine. Female gametophyte, that will instead bear the egg. Okay. The female gamete. So this part is clear. Fine. Gymnosperms are all heterosporous. They bear fertile leaves called sporophyll. The sporophyll will always remain in cluster and will be, looking like cones. So they will have male cones called pollen cone, likewise female cone or seed cone. Okay. In the pollen cone, we will have microsporophyll, on the surface of which will be born microsporangia, and that will instead be bearing microspores. Likewise, for the megasporophyll, they will be bearing megasporangia, which will instead be bearing the megaspore. Alright. Clear this much? Fine. So that's what is written here, you see. Microspores are formed within microsporangia, which instead are borne on microsporophyll, which are compactly arranged in strobilus or cones called male or pollen cone. Likewise, megaspores are formed within megasporangia, which are borne on megasporophyll, which are compactly arranged in cones called female or seed cone. So this part is clear, I guess. All of you have understood this much, right? Now see, the megasporophyll bears integumented megasporangia or ovules. So the gymnosperms will bear ovules which will possess integuments. Now you know very well from the pteridophytes that presence of integument is very, very important for seed formation, right? So integument is present. But do remember here a single integument is present, not two integuments, which will be seen in angiosperms. Okay. So the ovule in gymnosperm is orthotropous in nature. Orthotropous ovule means where the funicle, saliza and micropyle, these three parts will remain in a straight line. We will call it orthotropous ovule. Okay. So see, these three are in the straight line and there is a single integument present. Inside the integument or internal to the integument remains nucellus, and in the nucellus at the center remains the female gametophyte, which is multicellular, and it holds two or more archegonia, the same archegonia which you have learned in bryophyte and pteridophyte. So within the archegonia would remain the egg, alright, the female gamete. Fine. Is that clear, the structure of the ovule? Fine. Now see, the male or the female reproductive bodies may be born on the same tree, like in Pinus, that means Pinus is monoecious, or on different trees, that is in Cycads. So Cycads are dioecious. Do remember these important facts, they are very important for your exam. Now, one of the cells of the nucellus differentiates as megaspore mother cell. MMC is megaspore mother cell. So one of the cell of the nucellus would, it will specialize and become megaspore mother cell, which will undergo meiosis, that is reduction division, and finally give rise to megaspore tetrad, means 4 megaspores, 4 haploid cells. Okay, out of which 3 will degenerate and only 1 will survive. So that one that will survive, we call it the functional megaspore. Okay. So the functional megaspore undergoes repeated mitosis. Now it will keep on undergoing, continuous mitosis, forming multicellular female gametophyte bearing 2 or more archegonia. Okay, 2 or more archegonia will be finally born inside each ovule. Okay, now pollination is by anemophily or wind pollination. So finally, when the ovule is mature or it is ready to be fertilized, what will happen, you see, from the pollen cone, the pollen grains in large quantity will be released. And they will be transferred towards the seed cone or the female cone via wind. So wind pollination is happening here and we call it anemophily. Okay. So once the pollen grains will reach the seed cone, it will come across the ovules, isn't it? Now in the ovule, what do we have? The micropyle is the tip, right? So as soon as the pollen grains will fall on the tip of the ovule, that is on the micropyle, they now will germinate. The pollen grains will germinate and give rise to a tube-like structure called pollen tube. And this pollen tube will carry 2 male gametes inside the archegonia. Okay, 2 male gametes inside the archegonia. So this finally, when the pollen tube, suppose this is the pollen tube and this is the archegonial venter that contains the egg. So pollen tube is going to carry 2 male gametes, and the pollen tube would finally burst and release these 2 male gametes inside the archegonia, isn't it? Now in gymnosperms, one of the male gamete will fuse with the egg, causing fertilization or forming a zygote. The other one will simply degenerate. Do remember this, okay? So pollen grains will germinate and the pollen tube will carry 2 male gametes towards or inside the archegonia, and out of the 2 male gametes released, one will degenerate. Only one will fuse with the egg, forming the zygote. Understood? So see here, each pollen germinates, forming a pollen tube which carries 2 male gametes and discharges them near the mouth of the archegonia. One of the male gamete fuses with the egg, forming the zygote, and the other degenerates. Alright. So after fertilization, when the zygote is finally formed, what will happen? Finally, the zygote would develop into an embryo by taking nourishment from the female gametophyte. So as the zygote will develop into embryo, it will keep on undergoing cell division, isn't it? So at that time, it would require a lot of energy and lot of nourishment that would come from the female gametophyte. This is the female gametophyte. Understood this? This being the nucellus, this is the female gametophyte. Okay, the female gametophyte will provide the nourishment to the developing embryo. Okay, and hence the female gametophyte will act here like the endosperm. So do remember, the food-laden nourishing tissue in the gymnosperm is the female gametophyte, okay, which will act like the endosperm here. And the endosperm in gymnosperms will be haploid. So all the cells in the female gametophyte are haploid, isn't it? So the endosperm in gymnosperm will be haploid. Understood that? Fine. So at last, finally the zygote develops into embryo by taking nourishment from the female gametophyte, which will act as the endosperm, and eventually the ovule converts into a seed. The ovule will convert into a seed, and those seeds will be naked and not enclosed within a fruit. Hence gymnosperm, naked, sperma means seed. Alright, so that's all regarding the life cycle of gymnosperms. Let me again tell you the entire thing so that it becomes easy for you to understand. So first thing, gymnosperms are heterosporous. They bear separate or smaller microspores and larger megaspores. Okay, male and female spores respectively. During reproductive phase in the gymnosperms, first thing that will happen is that fertile leaves called sporophylls will be born, but in cluster forming a cone-like structure. So the cone, which will be a microspore, okay, that is called the pollen cone or male cone, and the one associated with megaspore is called seed cone or female cone. Okay, the pollen cone will have the microsporophyll, which will bear microsporangia, inside which will remain the microspores or pollen grains. Likewise, the female cone or seed cone will bear megasporophyll, which will bear megasporangia or ovule, and finally that will contain the megaspore. Alright. Now, the ovule of the gymnosperm is orthotropous and it will bear 2 or more archegonia containing the egg. Okay, the female gametophyte will be present within the ovule and will not show any free-living independent existence. Alright. So once the pollen grains in large quantity will be released from the pollen cone, they will be carried via wind, that is anemophily, and finally will be transferred to the seed cone. Okay. So as soon as the pollen grains reach the micropylar tip of the ovule, what will happen? The pollen grains will germinate, giving rise to a pollen tube. And the pollen tube will carry 2 male gametes inside the archegonia. Okay. Inside the archegonia, those 2 male gametes will be released, where one of them will degenerate and the other will fuse with the egg, forming the zygote. After zygote formation, continuously mitosis will take place, giving rise to an embryo which will take nourishment from the female gametophyte, which here will act like an endosperm. So the endosperm in the gymnosperms will be haploid in nature. Alright, and eventually the ovule will convert into a seed. Fine. So that's what is the life cycle of gymnosperms all about. Now let us move on to the last part of our discussion, that is life cycle and economical importance. Now for the last part of gymnosperms, so let us start with the types of gymnosperms, which I have already explained before. Here are a few examples from each category. So there are 4 types of gymnosperms. Conifers, the most predominant ones. They are found in the colder climatic areas, and the main examples are Pinus, Araucaria, Thuja, etc. Cycads, the next category, the main member would be Cycads, which have palm tree-like appearance and are found in warm climatic areas or plains. Then comes the needles, the wooden climbers among the gymnosperms. There are 3 members associated, that is ephedra, which is highly medicinal, with Wilwitschia and Netum. And the last one is jingoals. Here the only member is Jingo Biloba, which is a tall tree with fan-shaped leaves and is called maidenhair tree, or because it's the only member that is living in this particular category, we call it the living fossil as well. That being said about the 4 types of gymnosperms, moving on to the economical importance. See, first is edible seeds. The seeds of Pinus gerardiana is called chilgoza and is edible. Mainly it is roasted and eaten. Timber. Gymnosperms possess softwood and it is used to make light furniture, plywood, matchsticks, etc. Paper. Gymnosperms are going to act as perfect raw material for paper manufacturing industries. Alright. Ephedrine, it's the medicine that's extracted from ephedra and it's used to treat asthma. Likewise, Taxol. Taxol is another drug that is anti-carcinogenic. It is used to treat cancer and it is obtained from the bark of Taxus. Finally is resin. It's a dark color semi-fluid material that that oozes out or that is released from cut plant parts of gymnosperms. Okay, it is as if when the resin is released from that cut plant part, as soon as resin comes in contact with air, it solidifies. That's how it seals off, or it will be closing the cut plant parts, and hence it will protect the plant from microbial invasion. Now resin is commercially extracted because it consists of 2 things, that is turpentine and rosin. Rosin is used for waterproofing, and likewise turpentine is going to be used as solvent in paints, polishes and wax. Alright, so now that we are done with the economical importance of gymnosperms, let us finally move on to the life cycle. And the life cycle here I have mainly discussed for Pinus. Okay, so see, as you know very well, the main plant body is sporophytic, which is diploid. Alright, and as eventually it enters the reproductive phase, the plant will bear male cone and female cone, or pollen and seed cone respectively. The male cone will bear microsporophyll, alright, and female cone bears megasporophyll. Likewise, the microsporophyll will eventually bear microsporangia, and megasporophyll will bear megasporangia, that is the ovule. The microsporangia will have or will possess microspore mother cell, and megasporangia will bear megaspore mother cells. Up till this it is diploid. Okay, all of these will be diploid. To N, all of that. Fine. Now finally, see, the microspore mother cell and megaspore mother cell will undergo meiosis, the reduction division, giving rise to microspores and megaspores respectively. So hence these are haploid. Okay, so haploid generation or gametophytic generation begins from here. Alright, microspore will eventually give rise to pollen grains, and megaspore will bear the female gametophyte. The pollen grains will carry the male gametes, and female gametophyte will possess the female gamete or egg. Both male and female gamete will undergo fusion, which is called syngamy, resulting into a diploid zygote. So eventually now again from haploid state we are back to diploid state or sporophytic generation. Zygote will give rise to embryo by continuous mitosis, and embryo will develop into, or the ovule finally will develop into a seed, and the seed will again give rise to a new sporophyte. So this is the life cycle of a gymnosperm. But do remember, even if it looks as if half of the life cycle is for haploid and half for diploid, but then do remember in gymnosperm as well as angiosperm, the gametophyte or the haploid plant body do not have any free living existence. It is going to be completely dependent or within the sporophyte. So that's why here the life cycle pattern in gymnosperm and angiosperm both will be diploid or diplontic life cycle. Okay, they possess diplontic life cycle, as the haploid generation do not have any free living existence. Alright, so that's all regarding gymnosperm. I hope all of you are clear about it. So in the next class we'll discuss the final and the most advanced category of plants, that is angiosperms.